By its very nature, Forza Horizon is a franchise that runs along a razor's edge of being either a racing sim or an arcade racer. A game that plays with the elements of cars with such mechanical complexity that you need a degree in mechanical engineering or physics to fully exploit them, while also being a game that encourages you to jump off the side of a mountain once in a while and ram piñatas until they explode. Because of this nature, the game has an exceptional depth for those who are willing to dig, while also being playable by those with only a surface-level knowledge. And incidentally, those with only surface-level knowledge can profit off of the research and discovery of those who dug by virtue of shareable tunes and car builds. If you have the funds, you can download someone's shared build, and the game will automatically purchase, install, and tune the appropriate parts onto your card to match. In addition, the game rewards those with a lot of downloads with a flow of credits per download and use. The same goes for paints and decals. If you make something interesting enough that you want to share it, you're rewarded for doing so with in-game credits. Speaking of feeling rewarded, with the primary progression route being founded upon your ability to buy and improve your cars for the game's variety of different racing types, there's no better reward than XP and money, which the game showers you with in spades if you look for it. Hundreds of breakable XP and fast travel boards are hidden throughout the world, with the former giving you XP towards your next game level, and the fast travel boards saving you money if you choose to teleport yourself to another place in the map for convenience. The credit boards that were present in previous games are absent in Horizon Mexico, but this is compensated for with a greater number of XP boards that lead you to the ever-enticing Horizon Wheelspin, a giant slot machine that provides you with free cars, rarer cosmetic unlocks, and cash prizes. The rarest of these boards being the 5,000 XP boards, which clearly have had a lot more care put into their hiding places. 1,000 XP boards may just simply be on the side of the road. 3,000 XP boards you'll find somewhere off of the beaten path. And the 5,000 XP boards may be found even inside of a waterfall, or, well... more unique places. Horizon Mexico is in a unique situation when it comes to level design. The world is just as much an intentionally designed racetrack as much as it is a photorealistic recreation of real-world places. Where Horizon 4 had a one-to-one recreation of a good chunk of Edinburgh, Horizon 5 takes the idea of recreating its locations to the nth degree using advanced photogrammetry. To reference a previous review, Resident Evil Village did a similar thing using Quixel Megascans. What photogrammetry does is that it takes a sequence of hyper-quality photos or videos which can be used to interpret a scan of what was in the photo. These scans can then be used to create exact models of the subject in a program or in a game engine. This means that artists don't have to grind out the painstaking levels of detail needed to make something look real. Now they can simply pull things out of reality and put them into a game, provided that they have the budget and technology for it. Quixel Megascans is essentially a digital library of assets created using this method, and they used Unreal Engine 4 to demonstrate. What this has done for Horizon 5 is that it's allowed Playground Games to perfectly recreate portions of real-life Mexico that they've chosen in true photorealistic quality. Not only could you visit the actual reference location in Mexico, but you could theoretically already know your way around it if you've memorized Horizon 5's map. It's through this process, with the addition of some new roads, paths, and areas to play in and aid traversal, that Playground Games has managed to create their most faithful and fleshed out festival yet. Stability-wise, the game is bad. Let's go down the list. Occasionally there are broken textures, and the render distance inconsistently changes without any edits to the settings, which unfortunately means I also can't necessarily get footage of this specific problem since I can't force it and recreate it. It's just that inconsistent, so you're gonna have to trust me on that. There's also been a wealth of money and XP glitches which have allowed many players to gain unlimited money and XP, effectively breaking the in-game economy, as well as negating any sort of real progression or incentive since they can now buy anything that they want at any time. The loading screens in particular are abysmally bad, taking consistently between 30 seconds to open over 2 minutes in some circumstances, especially when first loading the game. Although, perhaps this is a limitation of the hardware of my system, so I'll yield on this one, but that's okay, because this isn't actually what manages to tank the stability score anyway, believe it or not. What does is that the game crashes. A lot. Enough that I've stopped counting how many times, but I stopped counting after 5, and I've stopped playing games for a lot less. And as an aside, yes, there are a bunch of recommended home remedies on forums and other official documents. Don't use these apps at the same time. Uninstall these drivers, and so on. No. Bad. I'm sorry, you don't get to be the exception just because your game is beloved, ambitious, and pretty. If I don't have to change any of my systems, or any of my applications, or any of my drivers for Halo Infinite, Doom Eternal, Rocket League, or I don't know, the other Forza Horizon games like 3 and 4 all on the same PC, why does this one get a pass? It doesn't. Fix your game. The dynamic weather feels like an appropriate evolution from the previous game. To give some context, each Horizon game innovates on its predecessor and adds some new thing that ends up being a proof of concept for the future game. For example, the first DLC for Horizon 3 was this winter wonderland complete with a giant snow-capped mountain and a frosted village, which ended up being a proof of concept for different weather conditions that led into the season system for Horizon 4, where a quarter of the time the entire map was covered in ice and snow. The changing seasons macro weather system was both carried over to Horizon 5 and added upon with a micro weather system, where thunderstorms and sandstorms can just naturally appear and be driven into the world provided that the season is appropriate for it. On top of this, the customization has received, if only a few, some new additions to both cosmetic and tuning changes. New differentials can be purchased that preload a given tune that's best for a particular use case, such as drifting or drag racing. There are also new transmissions, adding not only the final drive and individual gearing options, but also a choice of how many gears you want in the transmission. Both of these can be tweaked to the player's personal feel, regardless of what presets they come with. And lastly, I want to mention a point that is partly subjective, so take this statement with a grain of salt. Horizon 5 may very well be by a wide margin the hardest game in the series. It seems that Playground Games finally realized the irony of having their highest difficulty be, quote, unbeatable, and yet you could still place first if you were good enough at building your tune and also, with driving it. Now, whenever I think about playing this game on unbeatable, all I can think of is, yep, it sure is. Each Horizon game has a loosely fit story in order to give context to what the player is doing. Breaking speed camera records, mastering drift zones, and jumping your car off of mountains are all good for PR. In Horizon 5, the story evolves in a sense that feels like a combination of the stories of the last 2 games. In Horizon 3, you were the head of Horizon Australia, and you were responsible for the festival's expansion and PR. Nothing moved forward without your permission or testing. In Horizon 4, you took a step back from management and were welcomed into Horizon UK as a legendary racing figure that everyone was watching and waiting to prove themselves against, with every radio host and administrator just waiting on the edge of their seat to see what insanity you'd pull next. In Horizon 5, you're essentially both, being formally called the Superstar. Both directly and offhandedly, your status now precedes you. You're that near-mythical racing legend that has graced and raged through each festival thus far. And thus, you're also given the exclusive choice on what you want to see be explored or built next. However, there is a little bit of bad news, a consequence of attempting to do a bit too much with a narrative that was barely there to begin with. In every game, your character was a self-insert. You've always been given the ability to make edits to your character's sex, skin color, face, hair, clothing style, and other things that identify who you are. When you storm into the Horizon Festival in the opening, it's a power trip. It's this fantasy, knowing that you're this unbelievable driver at an incredible festival, making the show of things. But now, for the first time, your character speaks and has a personality. And somewhat awkwardly, there is only a single male and female voice, both of whom are British. First of all, it's a bit odd that they didn't reveal that your character was British all along while you were actually in the UK in the last game and saved it instead until you returned to North America. And second, it seems like a soft retcon of every single game's somewhat meta-narrative, I suppose. If you haven't noticed from just listening to me, I'm definitely not British myself, and I'm actually of Italian descent, so I chose this Mediterranean-looking guy in Horizon 5. It renders a lot of the investment in the character customization a moot point, when every time that my character speaks, I'm reminded that that character that was a guest in the first 2 festivals rose to such heights that he got to run a festival on his own and then take a vacation to the UK as an honored guest? That's not me. It's not my story anymore, and I'm just watching this character who I'm just following around with a camera behind the car, and that feels disappointing. On top of that, I've never had a situation where the narrative, regardless of which narrative it was, directly interfering with the gameplay. But there were several instances where I'd be headed to a race, doing a speed zone, or participating in some sort of Horizon arcade, only to be called by a Horizon admin and being told, "Hey Wolf, you've gotten enough accolade to do this next expansion. Hey Wolf, you need to do this showcase. Hey Wolf, you should really do this," and be pulled forcibly into a menu, which, since this is a live game so long as you're playing online with other players, meant that the world continued on in the background while I scrambled to try and get out of a menu that I didn't ask for and ignored everything that the NPC was saying. For a game whose main gameplay loop involves being speedy, it's ironic that the game has such a problem with bringing the pacing to such a screeching halt. This game is unbelievably gorgeous in terms of graphical fidelity. Every Forza Horizon game manages to one-up the last in this regard, and this game is no exception. I wish I had better hardware so I could appreciate it more, or more importantly, record it for you to appreciate more. The use of the aforementioned Quixel Megascans-esque photogrammetry data ensures that Mexico has been recreated in a more photorealistic level of detail than has ever been possible before in any previous Horizon game. Theoretically, it's not just the city streets that are one-to-one accurate, but even potentially just the boulders atop the Gran Caldera. They did a lot of work refining the sounds of the vehicles, chief among which is the vastly improved engine sound system from previous games, which dynamically changes not just based upon what type of engine is being used, but by what specific parts you've now put into them. And just as importantly is a quality of life change that, yes, probably should technically go in the mechanical section, but it's fundamentally a sound design thing, so I'm going to mention it here. For the first time ever in a Horizon game, you can now preview what your car sounds like while you work on it. Let's have a listen, shall we? Its nigh-perfect visual and sound design is marred by only one thing I can think of, and it's honestly pretty petty. So much so that I'm not going to let it affect the score here. But it does feel like it needs mentioning, but I'll elaborate on that during the bonus content section and won't bring it up much here. Horizon 5 has a ridiculous amount of content. The amount of game modes and the depth of the mechanics means that you could easily spend hundreds of hours in Horizon Mexico if you wanted. That said, I've spent this many hours on it myself. It easily has enough to keep you occupied for your money's worth, provided that one of the many yet-to-be-patched exploits hasn't cut your investment short. I'm in a very abusive love-hate relationship with this game. On one hand, I mean, just look at it. Well, okay, maybe don't just look at it because my recording sucks, but this game is pure eye candy, and it sounds amazing. The overhaul to the engine and car noise was just badly needed, and one of the things that Playground games just killed, absolutely. The dynamic weather in terms of like the typhoons and the sandstorms are awesome, even if they're nightmares to drive in, they're really cool. They essentially evolved the labs and Super 7 to the point of just being the Forza equivalent of like Halo's Forge mode or Mario Maker's editor, and the amount of content in the game, even before user-made stuff, is just stupid, it's crazy. But on the other hand, it also commits the cardinal sin of game development, the same problem that made me drop BioShock 2, just stop playing it entirely. It just crashes too much and freezes too much. There's no greater sin that any game can commit than telling me that I'm not allowed to play it. Also, I know this is just me whining, but Unbeatable's too freaking hard, man. And no, the irony of that statement's not lost on me, but it was always a point of pride to me that I could play both Horizon 3 and Horizon 4 on nothing but Unbeatable mode and consistently win a ton of credits because of it. In particular, I spent hours optimizing my Dodge Demon drag racing build, and it was just untouchable, even by unbeatable AI, and I just used it for grinding out credits for drag racing. But it took a ridiculous amount of time and in-game credits to get it to that point. Now, with the same build, I'm lucky to get a podium finish, at best, let alone ever getting first. And I'm sorry, just teardrops. You put teardrops by Bring Me the Horizon in the game on the Horizon XS station. I'll be honest, I was shocked and hyped when I heard that song start. I thought, there's no way this snuck past censorship. What? Okay. But then just... Guys. You have a game that relies almost exclusively on licensed music for its soundtrack, but you're so deathly afraid of changing your rating or offending anyone. With that being the case, don't put a song in if you have to censor half of it. What is wrong with you? Oh, I'm sorry, but like, that was so bad I could not ignore it. It's actually a joke. It's so bad. And so, I guess to wrap it all up, there are times where I'm just vibing and having fun, and honestly having like a 9 or 10 out of 10 experience with this game, but then the game crashes and I'll reboot it and just lose over and over using a build that I put my heart and soul and time and credits into. And then I sit there realizing I'm just not having fun anymore, man. Like, I guess I'll average it out and I'll give it a subjective score of like a 5 or a 6, maybe. But for a more consistent experience, I'd honestly recommend you get Horizon 4 instead. Or, better yet, Horizon 3, the Hot Wheels DLC, which is pretty much still uncontested as the most fun racing thing I've ever played to this day, and Horizon 5 hasn't dethroned that yet. We'll have to see what the DLC looks like in the future, but enough about what I think. Is the game actually good? I'll be honest in saying there's a part of me that wished it didn't deserve the 8. I mean, I really did want it to be lower, but even with a dismal stability score, here we are. I guess that's just a testament to how much the game has to offer regardless. I mean, after all, it's still Forza Horizon.